Alrighty guys, True Techno Gamer here, and it's finally about that time. What has this channel really been about? Me sharing stories. I've been splitting it between gaming and home theater, if you follow my channel. But for the home theater section in particular, the first video that I took a stab at putting out there was called Journey to Endgame. And I've been kind of trying to talk about my journey as I learn, research, experience different levels and different, brands in audio and hi-fi. Really accumulating to the point where I can build what I hope to be and I call my endgame system, or is it? But on that journey, the main piece, the main component that if you follow me, you've heard me complain about over and over again are the speakers. I've updated my processor. I've done stuff to my room. I've added a high-res music streamer, chairs, blah, blah, blah. I've done a lot to the room. The speakers that I have now are 15 years old this year. And that was always like, that's the next step. That's, the weakest link. Well, I'm happy to say that I am closing in on getting my speaker upgrade. There's a lot going on for me right now, so even if I do get it, or when I get it right away, it's probably going to be a little bit of time before I can really get it set up and unboxed and all of that good stuff. But happy to report that I am closing in on it, and I think it's important for me to really try to articulate best as I can through this channel to you guys what my thought process was as I kind of made the decision that I'm making to get the speakers that I'm getting. Now, I have spent years, and I mean years, researching, trying to learn, find out more about speakers. There's so many different speaker options out there, and sound is so subjective and so weird, quite frankly. You could listen to the same set of speakers one day at one place and then go to another store or another place, hear the same set of speakers but different room and a different electronics, and just have a completely different experience. I've done that. And I'm like, 1 minute these speakers sound amazing, the other minute they don't sound all of that, right? That kind of thing. So sound is weird, and it just takes a lot of time. Now, at this level that I've been looking at for these speakers, this is a huge, huge purchase for me. So I've been taking it to heart. And really trying to take my time with it, really trying to be diligent about it, because it's just such a huge purchase and just an indulgence at that, right? It's not like a necessity. So, it's been a really, really thought-provoking and very diligent process for me. So I'm going to try to articulate, what that was for me, what my thought process was there. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I think this is really going to be fun because I've been looking for people. I've been scouring the internet, scouring YouTube, scouring everything. I've been going to trade shows, going to every boutique, every dealer that is anywhere near me in DC, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, Jersey, New York, trying to listen to as much as I can. That's research, guys. This isn't coming from nowhere. This isn't just me reading a magazine or someone word of mouth saying, oh, try these. I had to really know for myself, what was really ticking for me, what was connecting with me. And that's going to be different than any one of you guys watching this, right? But that's the way to do this, is you really got to just figure out what you like. And I think I've done that. Yeah, like I said, it's fun. So I'm going to break this whole series up. This is part one. I'm going to do this in kind of like these home theater stories that I've been doing on my channel. But I'm going to talk about, so the speakers that I have been having my eyes on, as some of you know if you follow my channel, are the Paradigm Persona, the 7F model in particular. And that's the one that I, after all of the research and all the listening, I'm still, sold on them for me. And that's what I'm looking to finally get. So the first part of this is why Paradigm, right? For me, again, I'm not just coming out of this from nowhere. I have a history with Paradigm, and I've had some experiences with Paradigm that are, I think, fairly unique. So that's why Paradigm was even on my radar. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other companies on the radar, and I will get into that in a future part of this. But why Paradigm, and what is my history with Paradigm? So let's go into it. Let's go back and rewind the clock a little bit. What, 2006, somewhere around there, maybe. Around that time, there was a store in New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey. There's a store called 6th Avenue Electronics. If you guys are in that area, you know 6th Ave. So 6th Ave, was definitely a step up in terms of the brands and the audio equipment they carried compared to Circuit City and Best Buy and The Wiz or whatever, like that kind of stuff at the time. So they had Paradigm, and they had like the Paradigm reference series, the Studios, and the Signature line, that kind of stuff. And then they had, some other brands that were, definitely like thousands of dollars that you could spend, right, on some of these stuff. So I walked into 6th Ave one time with my friend, and I just walked in, and they had a section where they had like the hi-fi speakers, and I just heard this sound. I had no idea where it was coming from. I don't remember the song right now, but I just heard the sound. And I was just like, yo, what the hell? It was just like the best sound I ever heard. And I was like, where is that coming from? Like, what is that? So I go to this section, and they had all of these speakers. They had bookshelves on the wall and in walls and towers, right? And I'm just hearing this sound, and I'm just like, what is that? Like, it moved me. It gave me chills. There's only a handful of times in my life that I've listened to some speakers or some sound system where that happened. And when I say it's not even a handful, it's less than it. It's probably like 2 or 3 times. This was the first time that I really went in front of some speakers and was just like, what am I feeling? You know what I mean? Like, it was, people that know audio, you guys know what I'm talking about. It was that feeling. That's what we've been chasing. That's what I've been chasing now for 20 plus years. And I had that, and I was like, okay, what is this? So it turns out that it actually was Paradigm, which I had never heard of before this, by the way, really. Paradigm bookshelf speakers. And it was the Signature speakers. This was the Signature version 1. So it had the G-PAL, like the gold aluminum tweeter, and, stuff like that. This is before the beryllium tweeter, if you follow Paradigm. And I was just amazed by the sound. I was just like, now, of course, the Signature at the time, that line was even a little cheaper, but those bookshelves themselves were probably around like $3,000, somewhere around there, maybe $3-4 for just the bookshelf pair. Way, kind of too rich for my blood, I thought at the time. Plus, I kind of like the idea of having floor standards because I had, a relatively big space. But I was just like, Paradigm was on my radar. I went back to the store several times, listened to the sound. I was just like, wow, that sounds amazing. So what happened was Paradigm, did their trickle down. So that was the Signature version 1s. And shortly thereafter, they came up with a Signature version 2 that added a beryllium tweeter. And I'll go deeper into beryllium for those that don't know this stuff at all. I'll touch on this stuff deeper later. But beryllium, needless to say, is a really, really expensive, high quality metal that's used in audio. It's somewhat considered the holy grail, although there are some other options that are just as good or arguably even a little better. But I mean, generally speaking, when you talk about really, really hi-fi speakers and drivers, 5-figure, $10,000 plus range in general, you're going to see beryllium tweeter. It's like, that's kind of the holy grail. And I'll go into that why. So Paradigm added the beryllium tweeter to their Signature, which was their flagship at the time. And as part of that, what they did was they trickled down the Signature version 1 with the aluminum tweeter and aluminum mid-range and all this stuff into the reference studio line, which was the line right below the Signature, the second to highest line. So you kind of get the Signature experience for cheap. That was the idea. So when I saw that, now they added that starting with the studio version 4. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, I can't afford the Signature, especially the version 2s at the time. But I could maybe afford the studio, and it has the same drivers and general setup that the Signature had that had that awesome sound. Cha-ching, right? That makes sense. Let me go ahead and do that. And as you guys know, I have Paradigm Studio Reference version 4s that I've had since 2008 to now, right? 15 years. So that was how I, initially got in. I had that experience. I had that chill. Now I get the studios, and, to be honest, and I think I talked about this before on my channel, when I first got them, I'll never forget. The first day I got them, now I didn't know about burning, they say the speaker needs to kind of loosen up and all this stuff. I got it, I turned it on, and I just remember thinking like, it didn't really sound that much different than my previous Polk Audio speakers. Now, for context, those Polk Audio speakers were $700 for the pair, for both, right? Floor standers. These Paradigm Studios at the time were $3,000 for the pair, right? So we're talking, well, 4 times the price for these speakers. So I expected to hear, now they were bigger, they had more, more woofers and whatever. I expected to hear a meaningful difference. This is before I knew about room acoustics, before I knew about burn-in, like I said, before I knew, like, God, mind you, I took those new speakers and I put them in with the same speaker cables, the same general positions, the same electronics. Like, everything was the same. I just flopped out these new speakers, right? So, if you know audio, it's not really the way to do things, because these new speakers were definitely built for higher quality than what the receiver I had at the time was doing with those cheap audio, speaker cables that I was using at the time, that kind of stuff. I didn't touch any of that stuff right away. So my impression was kind of like, wow, 4 times the cost, these big, expensive things, that sound that I heard at the store at that time, I wasn't really getting that, to be honest. And I'll never forget that experience. And that's something that I've shared here on the channel, that one of my biggest fears with going up to this level and bringing it home and just being like, it's not really, like, that's the worst thing that can happen to me. It's like, well, what's the whole point of this, right? But over, across the 15 years, these speakers have served me really well. They're good for music, and, good and great for home theater. So, they're good two-way speakers. They serve me pretty well. Although they didn't knock my socks off or anyone else's, like, coming in socks off themselves. But the overall system that I want to build and updating, and, as I learned more, I learned a lot more about some of the other components in the room, and all of that stuff elevated my sound for sure than what it was when I started out with, no question. But at the end of the day, I definitely realized that the weakest link in my system are the speakers at this point, right? No question. I've updated a lot of stuff around it. So, not to say that they're bad, but again, I have a level of equipment now that can do more, right? And if I had a speaker that can do more, I can definitely push the overall envelope. So, maybe around like 5 years in, 2013-ish, 14-ish, somewhere around there, it's on my mind, like, well, if I was to get a new speaker, what would I get? And that's when I just started really thinking about it. I looked at everything and thought about everything. And again, since then, we're talking 10 years or so, roughly, that I really in earnest been thinking about, well, what would be the next step for me? And at the time, I didn't know what I know now today, of course, in terms of which brands are out there, that kind of stuff. But I was looking at Focal, looking at Bowers and Wilkins and stuff, looking at, Kefs and Revels and stuff like that, and Paradigm, of course. And the first option was, well, why not just go ahead and get the Signature? By this point, the Signature was on version 3. They had the beryllium tweeter. They updated a bunch of stuff around it. They enhanced the woofers and the finishes, et cetera, et cetera. And, at this point, the prices also was creeping up. The Signature is now at like roughly 3 times the price of what I paid for the reference. I just never felt that the Signature Paradigm speakers, Signature reference, was ever really the flagship that I really wanted at that price. It was almost 10 grand, By this point, they're like 9 grand. When I first heard of them and looked at them, the version 1 was like 6 grand. So the price had creeped up. And I'm like, am I paying almost that much? I just felt like it wasn't that significant of a step up. It really looked like I could have brought them home and my wife would have never even known I got new speakers. If I got them in black, they were a little bigger, but they just did not look and feel the part of a flagship. They sounded great. I've heard them side by side with the studios. I know they did sound better. I heard them, but it just wasn't a huge step. So that's why I never made that move. I looked at Golden Ear. I remember when the Golden Ear came out around that time. That was a big thing for the price. It was like, oh, you get this great sound, got a ribbon tweeter and built-in subwoofers. Horrible aesthetics though, right? Very, very rudimentary, just cabinetry and aesthetics. But they were also, buzzed. I've heard them a bunch of times. They sound pretty good, but again, it just wasn't that big step up. Now, fast forward to, around 2015 or so. I saw, I think in a magazine or somewhere online, I heard about the Paradigm Concept 4F is what it was called then. This was Paradigm finally letting go of all of the shackles and going all out into high-end, right? They were releasing all their technology, really, really going for the high-end jugular. And of course, they didn't have a price at the time, but I remember seeing the speaker and reading articles of people that had heard them when they first debuted at Munich. I believe it was Munich 2015. And people were amazed. People were like, yo, Paradigm. Like, they are really coming out. These speakers sound amazing. And I was like, could this be it? Like, because it definitely, well, I wanted them to push well above the signature. So is this really doing that push? Is this really the worthwhile investment for me? And then, they showed it like that. Munich was the summer of 2015. So I remember they showed it again at CES, and it was videos of behind the scenes of people. And that's when they kind of said, okay, this is the line, the persona. They called the Paradigm Persona line, and we're going to release it. And these are the speakers it's going to have, these different models, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like, wow, like I remember seeing it and just like, this could be it. And then they announced the price, and it was like, whoa, yeah, super high. I can't afford it at that time. But if it's worth it, if I feel it's worth it, I'll keep my eye on it. I will tag it. And, one day, right, I will get there. And that's kind of how I looked at it. So fast forward, I think this is 2016 now, or maybe 2017. Sorry. Might have been early 2017, maybe. The Paradigm Persona line is technically launched. They're starting to trickle them out across all of the dealers and retailers in the U.S. So I'm living in Portland, Oregon at the time. If anyone ever been out there, shout out to Fred Sound of Music. Someplace I used to frequent when I was out there. They were a Paradigm dealer. And Rob Sample, who worked at Paradigm, or I believe he may still work at Paradigm, I'm not sure. But he actually lived in the Northwest, in kind of like the greater Portland area. So when the Paradigm Persona was coming out, he actually was going to get a pair of 9Hs, the flagship, and bring them to Fred's Sound of Music to have them to kind of warm them up and, just for a demo. And Fred Sound of Music put out this thing, and I was getting a frequent there. So they sent me a notice saying, hey, come check out the Paradigm Persona. We're going to have them in store all weekend or something, and you can listen to them and go at it. So, of course, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm there. This is kind of like, this is almost a preview before it really, really got in the market, so to speak. I'm there. I got to hear these, right? So I go there. I go to the store. I will never forget. I probably was there for about a good 3 hours, two and a half to 3 hours or so. And I got a chance to really sit down. They had connected to their tablet with, I think it was Rune. I can't remember the electronics they had, but they had it. The room wasn't great. The room wasn't really great, but they had the 9Hs there. And they're playing through these songs. And when I tell you there was a handful of times, remember I said that music, I've heard music coming from a system, coming from speakers that moved me, that literally gave me chills, that literally gave me goosebumps, that raised the hair on my arms and my legs and made me giddy. Like I didn't know what I was feeling, what I was seeing. This was time number 2. Paradigm, once again. I will never forget that. I heard the 9Hs and it was sound that I just never even knew was possible. It blew me away. These 2 speakers, full range. They had dialed in with ARC because the 9Hs have built-in ARC Genesis support and have the built-in sub. So it was just a nice full range sound. And I remember, some of the songs that I heard, which I still use to this day, and I've never heard sound, obviously on my system or anywhere else I've been that quite matched that. I wound up writing about my impressions of this first time of listening to the 9Hs on AVS Forum. And I actually will link it. I will link it to this video if you guys are interested, because it's still there, of course. And I wrote up a detailed description of my experience. So check that out, if you see that. But it moved me. And that's when I was like, okay, these personas are the real deal. I think they are part of my future. Now, I didn't want to commit to that, obviously, then and there. I couldn't afford them. And I couldn't afford any speakers in that price range at this time. But I kept the eye on them. But of course, I got to do my due diligence. I got to listen to everything possible. Now, if I'm opening up the doors to afford speakers that are 30 grand, what else is out there that's 30 grand, 20 grand? And I started really looking into the real hi-fi of audio and speakers and looking at stuff like the Focal Utopia and Focal Sopra, which Sopra also came out around this time. And I heard that, and that was an amazing experience. Opening my doors, looking at the B & Bowers & Wilkins Diamonds closer. The Revel Ultima 2s. Then I'm introduced to Magico and all of these other brands I can go into, the Kef Blades and the Kef Reference and blah, blah, blah. But I did my diligence, and we'll talk more about that. But this was the history with me and Paradigm. It comes from a real place. I've owned Paradigm now for 15 years. and I've heard them throughout multiple decades. I've seen all of their lines, from the entry level, from the monitor to the premier to the prestige, right? And understand, I don't like all the Paradigm speakers. I really don't. Like prestige, I never was a fan of. The current founders, I'm not really big on, to be honest. I've heard them a bunch of times. For me, my taste, they just don't do it for me. It's taste. And Paradigm, as a brand, they make a lot of different speakers. And I don't love all of them, believe me, right? But the persona, what that did to me that day, that set the stage for, something that I felt I was going to be chasing until I achieved it. And, that was it. And, so I just spent the next 7 years researching, listening, experiencing a bunch of different, the persona line, of course, but also a bunch of different other speakers. And again, I will go into that. So for the next part, and like I said, I'm going to separate this out. I'm going to really talk about and hone in. And, some people, I've done this on my forums already and stuff like that. And people want to say, I'm a walking advertisement for Paradigm Persona. So be it. I think these speakers are great for a reason. I'm not the only one, but there are a lot of people that want to hate on Paradigm for no reason whatsoever. I'm going to hopefully, by the time I finish, this series and just finish telling you guys my story, I'm going to hopefully at least open your eyes and ears to Paradigm and to the Persona line and why they are special and why they are great. That doesn't mean that they will be for you. The sound is completely subjective, but why, they're a special speaker in a special series. So for the next part, I'm going to really just talk about the Persona speaker, the Persona line, why, it appeals to me, and kind of go over like in detail what that is. And then for the third series, I'll talk about some of the competition and all the other speakers that I've listened to over the last 10 years or so, and what I think of them and why I still settled on the Paradigm. So please stay tuned. Check out the rest of the series. I'll try to get them out when I can. But for now, part 1 in the books, Paradigm. If anyone at Paradigm ever watches this video, Rob Sample, shout out. I don't know if you remember me, but we met a couple times. I talked to a bunch of people at Paradigm at different shows and whatever. But I love what you guys do. Keep it up. Yeah, consider me a walking, talking advertisement for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy the content. That's it for now. True Techno Gamer. Till next time, signing off.